Wait. Okay, I'm not gonna. We don't have to record so soon. I'll pause. If you'd like.
And it's okay. Yeah, it's okay to cast these. Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah. I think that'll make the most sense. Yeah. The people online
will miss out, but that's okay.
Yeah. So I wonder where.
Should we can pass them around? Yeah. Or do you want to talk about them before they get passed around?
Well, I think we could pass them around right now.
It's quite heavy, this one.
This one's the same one before.
Morning, how are you? Yes. I'll send you an email update. Yes.
Pretty good for somebody.
Well, yeah.
We have enough pain when you do that.
You may need just a couple of minutes for the 8 o'clock stuff. Make your way over.
Oh, that's why I wish cars were. A lot of cars in the parking.
8 o'clock was very slow.
I
Yeah.
don't know if you want to take an opportunity to. Yes, the right time will be discussing. The presentation.
Passing around. Icons.
Were you at the 8 o'clock service list?
No, I missed it.
Okay, I was just wondering if it had gotten out yet.
It's out.
Yeah, okay. I think this is. Good, so, okay, how do we, is anyone online or?
No one's joined online yet.
Okay.
Yeah, the screen is full, so it's just us as parts.
And I can move around.
Yeah,
right?
the owl will follow you.
Okay. Right, well, good morning, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jay Clark. And I will be presenting this morning's discussion. And as I say, I hope this turns into a discussion. I've got notes that I think you've all picked up and that I'd like to go over, but I'm hoping we can kind of have a good discussion. And I have to admit, this is a little out of my normal comfort zone for St. John's. I'm not used to presenting to people, much less from my century, but are even an eighth of my age. So so hopefully some of the techniques of godly play will also jive with us. What we want to do today is really in continuing the discussion that has been the theme of the forum, which is how do we respond to the critique that Nietzsche and Marx have made about Christianity or religion promoting victimhood. We want to talk about that, but we're kind of going to take a roundabout way of getting there, and really want to start by talking about a couple of observations that start in February, and one of those being Candlemas, one of the oldest feasts in the Christian church, and then talking about also Black History Month and that observation, a relatively new American observation. And so want to take those two, and by using icons, sort of use those as the visual basis for our discussion, and kind of introduce those topics, Candlemas, Black History Month, but then see if we can work our way into, do these provide us with some type of response to that critique of religion. So I'd like to start first by talking what is an icon. And if you Google icon, look it up online, you will get an endless stream of information, of descriptions, and all very interesting, and give a good perspective. I've kind of taken three that resonated with me and included them in the notes here. And I think the first is really interesting in that an icon is a visible gospel, and that continues with these themes. I found a quote, I don't know who to attribute it to, but they basically said that an icon is theology written in images and colors. So it's really taking the power of the art to tell a story, to present a story. And then icons have been the subject of much formal study in that, and Craig may be able to comment better on the history here, but it was called the Seventh Ecumenical Council of 860, but it was the Second Council of Nicaea, so about 400 years, I think, after the creed was developed at Nicaea. And what came out of that council was a statement that said, all that is uttered in words, written in symbols, is also proclaimed in the language of colors. And so as we look at the three icons today and the others that are in the church, I think that's an important thing to focus on, is what are these images, what are these colors, how do they tell this story? And we'll try to look a little bit into that as we talk today. And another interesting thing about icons, and that is contrasting them with statues, another image, another and the person I was reading there brought up, statues are really a figure. It's a person, it's an object, and that whereas an icon allows the artist to really get into detail, and that the background is as important in many cases as the figure itself that's in the icon. And so focusing on not only the figure, but what details are there, what is in this picture can tell a very full story. So with that as a background, I'd like to first start talking about Candlemas. And so this is the icon for today, and we'll pass it around again for those that haven't had a chance to see it. I know it doesn't lend itself to a large room, but this will be on display in the church. But this is the icon of the presentation of Jesus at the temple. And so I would like to tell the story, the gospel from today. It's sort of in the style of how we do it in Godly Play. And so if we all think about this and reflect on this, maybe I'll come to the center more where it's a little easier to see here. What we have is on the 40th day after Jesus was born, Mary and Joseph took Jesus to the temple in Jerusalem, as was the tradition. And they went to the temple for the purification of Mary and for the presentation of their eldest son, Jesus. And as we look at this, we see there are 4 people at the temple. And we see Joseph. And Joseph is holding the offering that they brought, 2 turtle doves. And then we see the prophet Anna, who is next to Joseph. She's holding a scroll. We see Mary, the mother of Jesus. And then we see Simeon. And as Mary and Joseph presented Jesus, Simeon, who was a very devout man, came into the temple. And let's pass this around again. Hopefully people can see some of this. But Simeon came in and held Jesus. Now, Simeon had been told by God that he would not die until he saw the Messiah. And when Simeon held Jesus, he proclaimed, and I'm going to read these words, "Master, now you are dismissing your servant in peace according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory to your people Israel." And we call this proclamation the Song of Simeon, or the Nunc Dimittis. And Nunc Dimittis translates to, "Now you let depart." Simeon had seen the Messiah. Now Anna was also there for the presentation, and she too was a very righteous and devout person. And she joined with Simeon in praising God, and she went out and spread the word, told all in Jerusalem that would listen about this child, this gift, Jesus. Now Mary and Joseph and Jesus returned to Nazareth after this, where Jesus grew, was filled with wisdom, and had the favor of God upon him. So that is our story. Those of you at the 8 o'clock service have heard the gospel reading of that already today. And really the focus that I want to take for our discussion is on the Song of Simeon. Phil?
No, sorry, I was.
Oh, okay. It is on the Song of Simeon, and really the emphasis on the word light. And that this light was being brought to the world, being offered to the world. And as he said, this was for all. If you'll notice, he's said this is for the Gentiles, and this is for, how does he phrase it? This is for your people Israel. So really, those were the 2 distinctions at that time, and we'll return to that idea in a little bit. So that is the presentation, and out of this developed the feast Candlemas, which takes place on the 40th day after the birth of Jesus. And this is a time when the candles that will be used in the church during the year are blessed by the church. And these candles, of course, represent the light of Christ. So we see this theme developing, that light is being brought to the world. In Candlemas, there's just for a little history, Candlemas is one of the oldest feasts in the church. There's descriptions of it from the 380s AD, talking about it being held and describing how the service was conducted. And also the 40th day, Candlemas, February 2nd, is a day in many areas of the world, many cultures, families, traditions, where the Christmas decorations are taken down. In the more secular world, where we have to get our Christmas trees out to the curb by a certain date and that, it's developed that Christmas decorations come down on the 12th day of Christmas, but really, for many, this signifies the end of the Christmas season and Epiphany. And then on a more secular level, Candlemas is considered to be also where Groundhog Day evolved from. And our German friends, has they developed traditions with Candlemas, they focused again on the light, and their thought was that if they went out on Candlemas and saw light, that means there would be more winter. And this ties in, if I understood it correctly, with sort of an agrarian approach to the calendar and the cycle. And evidently, for farmers, and that was an indication that actually winter was going to be longer. And so our Groundhog Day, that was sort of brought here by German settlers, but it finds its roots in Candlemas. So with that, I'd like to now transition and talk a little bit about the icons that you'll see in the church in the month of February. Has an observation of Black History Month. And so there's 10 icons, thank you, that will be placed in the church, and that you'll be able to look at and reflect on. And I've chosen 2 that I'd like to talk a little bit about today. And this first is someone I was not familiar with at all, St. Martin de Porres. And in reading about him, this person is quite an inspiration, actually. And let's pass that around. St. Martin was born in Lima, Peru, in 1579. He lived to be about 60. And he is the patron saint of mixed race people, barbers, innkeepers, public health workers, all those seeking racial harmony, and animals. And so why is this? Well, St. Martin was born, he was the illegitimate son of a Spanish gentleman, they called him, a nobleman. And his mother was a freed African slave from Panama. And St. Martin was abandoned by his father. He really had to figure out how to live his life on his own. He was on his own quite a bit when he was young. And at the age of 15, he joined the Dominican order, or began a relationship with the Dominican order. And he became a lay person in that order, a lay brother in that order. and as he felt he had to figure out how he was gonna support himself, he apprenticed as a healer, which a barber surgeon is kind of the at the time how that discipline was developed, practiced. And so he became a healer, and he went on to do several things. He provided free medical service to all, from the wealthy to the poor, to anyone, those that were excluded, people of different races. And he provided free medical service to these people. In addition to that, he spent his time, or some portion of his time, collecting food and clothing from the poor, and then getting this distributed, or I'm sorry, from the wealthy, and then getting this distributed to the poor. And he did this every week. And if that wasn't enough, he founded an orphanage also, where he assembled teachers and other people to help the poor abandoned children of Lima. And so he really lived a full life, a giving life, and is really, I think, an inspiration in that he easily could have been bitter, having been abandoned by his own father. As a mixed race person, he was not felt to be a member of any group in his day, but instead of being bitter, he took and decided to serve. And I'd like to talk a little bit later about why we think he was able to do that and not turn inward on his specific condition, the things he had to endure as a person. But let's talk a little bit about the icon. And if you've had a chance to look at it, I think this is another good example of the details in there. I mean, this icon shows St. Martin de Porres, but the containers that we see there, and then the scissors, are the reference to his healing vocation. And I looked up the containers there are, and these are two herbs that were very common at the time in treatment. The valeriana is extracted from the root of a plant and was used at the time to treat insomnia, which I guess is a problem through the ages. And then the let me make sure I pronounce this correctly. The salvia is one of the major plants from the sage family. And so it is a psychedelic, but was used commonly for a treatment of a number of issues at the time. And digestive problems, what were some of the others? Yeah, coughs, sicknesses, and that. So this shows St. Martin had a knowledge and understanding of how to use and administer these to help people, to heal people. And then the last, so with that, like I say, I find this story very interesting and want to read more about someone I didn't know anything about a week ago. And that, but let's move on now. And the other icon that will be, or one that we've taken, but this will be on display in the church. This is Pauli Murray, and I think a number of us have some familiarity with Pauli. Maybe we'll pass this around on this side. From the film series that Craig curated for us last year, where we saw a film about the life of Pauli Murray, and here's another inspirational figure. Polly was born in 1910, died in 1985. So a more current person to think about, to reflect on. And you know, we, from the film that we saw, those that were able to see it, Polly was quite a scholar. She was a legal scholar. She was a civil rights advocate. And she also advocated for gender equality and throughout her life. And then later in her life, actually, as she progressed through all these vocations and actions, she was ordained as an Episcopal priest. And so that's, I find that very interesting, the mix of the activism, the legal knowledge, and then the priestly vocation. And as you look at this, there's many symbols that the artist Cameron Davis has put in his image here. And as I tried to understand what he was representing, Craig was able to find this statement from Cameron. And I thought that it was best to just give it to you in his words, instead of trying to rephrase this. And so, as you get a chance to look at this icon along with others in the church, this I think gives you something to reflect on. And again, there's the figure of Polly, but there's also these images in the background, and you can see that to the artist, as you read this, the issue or the topic of light comes up again. And as he has the sun and the moon, the two great sources of light in our world, he says, and as he looks at that for representing Polly's birth and passing. And he's also taken the shield at the top is a symbol for the Union of Black Episcopalians, and he's integrated that, merged that with kind of the pride emblem or whatever in colors. So there's a lot in here that a person can look at and reflect on, and I think that really shows us the power of icons, and it helps us to really look at the breadth of Polly's life and contribution. So that's an overview of the icons, and maybe we could pause. I've got some questions and some topics I'd now like to pose as I try to bring this back to our theme for the forum these days on victimhood and how we respond to that. But does anyone have any comments, any questions specific to these three icons?
Question about Brian. When was this accomplished? When were these icons? When was the decision made in the community to create these icons?
Last year.
Was it last year?
When did we start with it was when you began as our evangelist.
Was it just last year?
Was it the year before?
I think it was the year before.
How
Yeah, I think this is
yeah.
the year before that, so 2022.
Yeah.
Yes, 2022.
So did you create this picture?
With the Holy Spirit's help. And all the saints. Yes.
So I don't know if everybody realizes that, you know, that this, we have this handout. It's really beautiful.
And this represents all the icons that will be placed, or that now it will.
In the sanctuary, yes.
Right,
They're-
around.
in the window wells, in the baptistry, you'll see these icons through the month of February in honor of Black History Month. Yes.
Can I ask a question? What does it take for someone to be included in an icon, as an icon? Is it, are they a saint or?
It takes a person who decides to write a person
Okay,
into the story. And I think that was significant that in Jay's introduction, that the council talked about these being written. So their thought about was the same as the written word. So there is a whole school that always talks about icons as being written, never talk about it as painted. So, and the iconographers I know can spend a long time in prayer preparation around that subject in deciding how to portray.
And the formal process for the lesser feasts and fasts in the Episcopal Church, where we have a person like Pauli Murray, who was not recognized until I think it was 2 general conventions ago, when Pauli Murray was given July 1st, the day of Pauli's death, as the feast that the Episcopal Church observes. Pauli Murray with collect, so there's a prayer that's appointed for that feast day. A set of lectionary texts, so Old Testament, Psalm, Epistle, and Gospels appointed for that person's particular hagiography, how their life became a witness to the gospel of Jesus. And that process starts on the parochial level. So our diocesan convention would be where if we had a saint like Denzel Cardi through this process, that the folks at Holy Trinity Episcopal Church put forward Denzel Cardi as a potential saint in lesser feasts and fasts. He was the rector of St. Philip's, the old African-American church here in St. Paul. And then they went through the process of finding his hagiography, writing a collect, choosing scriptures for his feast day, and then putting that forward to diocesan convention. And then from diocesan convention went to general convention, where those saints are voted into the calendar of saints. And then icons can start being, are written according to those particular people's their biographies, like Pauli Murray and what Cameron Jarvis wrote in the icon of Pauli Murray. Yeah.
So there's a process that's written with the person who's following.
The church,
Yeah.
the canons, yeah, the church follows the canons. The iconographer is basically just honoring how this person's life represented a proclamation of the gospel.
Yeah,
Well, back to the theme of this faith formation about the critique of victimhood, that Christianity, leads people to be victims. Well, if you look at the icons, the Coors or Pauli Murray and the other ones, they truly are victims in their lives, and yet they use Christianity to become, much, heroes, to become icons that other people could emulate. So as opposed to the idea that religion is making us victims, instead it's taking victims and making them heroes.
I think that's a good lead in now into some of these ideas and discussions, right, is how, and that's sort of my first question that I thought we should discuss is why were Martin and Pauli able to get beyond falling into being a victim? What led them to look beyond that and go beyond that? And of course, all we can do, I think, is speculate. But I think it appears, and I don't know if you all agree, that religion had a significant impact on helping them understand the world and how they could participate in it, how they could be empowered. And so, yeah, I'm interested in what others think.
It feels like a call. It feels like a call. I don't know how many extent individuals became priests or Mary the Virgin in the church. But I, it was a sense of call, a strong call. So it was God. Different way.
You would say it in another way of saying that would be they felt the Holy Spirit. In a strong way to use the, whatever strength, aptitudes that they had in a way to help others. Rather than simply being overwhelmed by their position at the bottom of the social pile.
I think too that they looked at the world as it could be, or God's story as it could be. And found their place, how they can make that story whole. Or what was their place in it?
That they were a part,
They were.
they were a part of this world.
Right. Right, and that they could contribute.
I think the other thing is that if you read the Gospels, it's in, if you're reading the Gospels, especially like the Beatitudes, it's clear that Jesus was preaching that God cares about the poor, the broken, the outcasts, the outsiders. And he is inviting them in, and that's kind of, I don't know if they particularly, I'm pretty sure they studied the gospel and then they heard that, hey, I'm not, as opposed to, their current Christian nationalism, where if you're a billionaire, then you're, you're something special. Whereas they were able to read the actual gospels and hear that, if you're an outsider, if you're outcast, if you're, being scapegoated or any of these other things, Jesus was preaching in the Beatitudes that no, it's the meek that will inherit the earth, not the ones with the most toys,
Well, and in that sense, you're saying they were students, right? And I think we know for sure that was one of Pauly's approaches, was to really understand St. Martin. We can only speculate on where he found his inspiration, but right, I would tend to think that Jesus and for him was very empowering.
Yeah, Jay, I would add, I think they were forged by the discrimination that they experienced themselves. And wanted to do better for others who experienced that.
And to continue that idea, why do you think they wanted to do better? What, instead of falling into hopelessness?
I think through suffering, and we'll hear in Marjorie's sermon this morning, what can come out of that in terms of strength and commitment. I think that would have fed into it, and then their own gifts of intellect and the community share.
So, touches on our, maybe if there are others. I can't see that.
That's a no, go ahead and then we'll.
That's manifesting victimhood, like I'm a woman and I don't have the same choices as the guys do, or wallowing in something overwhelming, I should say, and overcoming.
Can you go with Kathy?
I also was thinking about these brave people. What would, I bet they had close confidants. I bet they could share their stories with their really good friends. But they weren't totally alone. There was, at least that's the way I feel, is to be able to share amongst trusted friends helps to lift up everything, frankly. So
I just add that in.
They found a community.
Through suffering. You know, I'm sure there are a lot of, I'm just assuming, at least in my case, there are other people that have the same situation. And to be sharing the stories with those close people in whatever community you're in, I think really can make a difference in healing and being lifted up and seeing light and seeing the miracles in the suffering. Someone else.
I'm reminded of some photographs and writing by Gordon Parks that I came across regarding his photography assignment in Chicago in the 40s. One of his earliest assignments was with Missionary Baptist Church. He was sent by Life magazine with a white reporter to go and document. Life was doing a whole series on Christianity in the United States. And the white reporter who was with him was sent away because he was respectful to the community, which was all African American, huge Baptist congregation. And so Gordon Parks was left taking photographs, and he also wrote the narrative of what he experienced. The article was never published by Life. But years later, the photographs were, and the articles were published later on. And what he says is that, and so I'm not thinking in terms of who was the preacher or who was the Polly Murray or who was the, whoever. I'm thinking the effect it had on the congregation. And what he said is the church lasted for 7 hours. And what he said is that for 7 hours, this community was protected. And they were nourished. And they were fed through the preaching, through the music, through the fellowship. So they could go out in the world and survive the other 54 hours or whatever it was that was left, 540 hours, maybe it was for the rest of them. So for 7 hours, they basically got inoculated. So they could go out in the world and survive. And that was his perspective and the way he wrote about it. And I just I mean his photographs are fabulous, but the way he saw it and the way he saw the people, and that's a contemporary. It's not speculating on what happened in the 16th century. This is what happened in the 40s in Chicago during the Great Migration, that was taking place. So I think that's not being victims. That's not being victims. And so when I hear about what was talked about earlier, I kind of went immediately to that and thought, this is not victimhood. This is figuring out ways to survive so that you can, make it through the aftermath.
There's a thread that connects all of these comments. And it's epiphany. They all have an epiphany of some type. And we talk about life. I mean, that's what the epiphany is. It's about the life.
Roger, thank you.
I think that's really good. What I was thinking is, if you look at Anna and Simeon, and carrying on when we didn't talk about Cornelius and Mrs. Friendly, they heard from God. There was some epiphany in their life where they could suddenly see things differently than others were. And I think we forget the role of the Holy Spirit in revealing the truth of what's in front of us. So all kinds of people were reading the gospel, but St. Martin de Porres and Polly Murray heard the gospel that they were reading and were empowered them in the Holy Spirit, giving that insight to be able to choose to live differently. And I don't think we give enough recognition to God's part in what happened in their lives. And that same listening and revelation is available to us. And that none of them were setting out to be saints. We define that for them afterwards. They were living what they understood the gospel to be.
I'd like to build on what Keith said and what others have commented on is, and especially this is what I thought is, because like I say, you know, we're trying to do about 3 things today. And I was trying to figure out how do we tie these all together. But when we look at the presentation at Candlemas, what part of that really stands out or represents, or how do we say that this is something that is for all people? And I think we find that in the last statement from Simeon, when he says he's presenting, or he's seen a light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory to your people Israel. And how we define that light, you know, in godly play, we always focus on the light being the Christ candle, and that this is emanating out and with us wherever we go. But I also think that light, I'd be interested how other people view the light, as hope. That people saw this light, saw hope for, and I can't remember who said, for what could be instead of what is, but what could be. And so that power of that symbol of light, and then we see that, and that's what I found interesting when was able to read Cameron Jarvis's comments on how important he felt light was in his presentation of Polly Murray. And so
Sparks. She's not angry, she's like, she's emanating that light.
We often talk about light as being healing. And so that light from Jesus has the ability to heal us and deliver us from what binds us and controls us. And so there's a real there's a tangible healing that comes on in our minds, memories, what's controlling us to be able to be different.
How refreshing to see an icon smiling. Very welcome.
As you know, the pictures that Gordon Parks made, you know, it is of these were maids and cooks, you know, cab drivers, and these were not any high-powered people. They came together and they spent 7 hours celebrating. They could have come together, and as so many meetings I get into Zoom, oh, did you hear what that man did this week? You know, they don't do that. They are saying, you know, here we are, let us celebrate our, you know, that we are created in the light of God. And they come together in the Black church. That's one of the powers of the Black church was, right, feeding everybody's soul.
Thanks, Dave. Chris.
I've said about every of the statements, they're so moving. I was so struck that of the wonderful prophetic voice from the song, I can't remember the number, but that the nations worship the work of their hands of idols of silver and gold, these shining idols that are a celebration or a privileging of materiality and wealth, power. But this is an anti-idol. And it is because the idols of silver and gold have eyes that cannot see, and ears that cannot hear, and mouths that cannot speak. And then the paradox that the prophet sees is that those who worship these idols will become like the idols they worship. They will become spiritually dead. They will become blind and deaf and dumb. And so these anti-idol idols are really extraordinary in that kind of light is not the light of power, it's the light of compassion, is the light of humility, is the light of God's mysterious grace. And it's such a joy to see to see our community creating and honoring these lights, true lights.
Thank you.
And that's one of the things that I love about the New Dominicans. I grew up in a church where when there were baptisms, the priest, after the child was baptized, walked the child up and down the aisle in the church and sung the New Dominicans. And I grew up thinking that that child was Jesus. And that child was gonna grow up in our family. And every time there was a child who was baptized, that's what happened. And it was so powerful to know that somebody who had lived such a good life was being rewarded, but was passing it on to everybody else. Wasn't just simply, I got my wish now, Instead, it was this thing that was being shared within the congregation, which I thought was.
Thank you. We need to probably start to close, but I want to bring up one more thing and sort of build on what Kathy talked about and having colleagues, having community. Because I think that's the other thing is that whereas victims often can feel isolated, I think we can look at St. Martin de Porres and Pauly and say that not only did they figure out how to look beyond the way they were treated for themselves, but then they spread that out. St. Martin has a healer and being with people. Pauly has a teacher, and so it is. They had a sense of, they must have. I mean, like I say, we're speculating and all this, but what we draw is that they must have had a sense of connectedness, which I think also comes from that idea of the light, that symbol of the light being for all. And that, so I just wanted to kind of maybe conclude with that. Keith, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just a quick FYI, the song was sent me in the song every Thursday at Compliment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, I think we need to conclude, but I appreciate your patience with me as a substitute for Mark. And I enjoyed just preparing for this. I hope that there was some information you were able to take from this and reflect.
And to recognize how close all of this to us, and unfortunately, we have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Okay, thank you, everyone. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed the discussion part of it. Yeah, well, thank you.
It said it was so it implied that he sort of had something, even though their life was poor, he was around his mother. And some sort of anesthesia.
Okay.
And so he was around something that was in his formation. And then it said also that after, I think it was 9 years, as a late writer, invited him to become a brother and Dominican order. So he was not just.
Okay, see, that's very interesting because the information on his life is not always consistent.
That's why,
Because
because the Dominican.
Yeah, because some sources said that he was abandoned by both his mother and father. But then others did imply that his mother was still a presence in his life when he was young. Nothing is, I didn't find anything that had that much detail.
That like the father abandoned the mother when.
Okay,
And for some amount of time, at least, that he still benefited from
and
the father, but, you know, it says it never was a marriage, but it was.
yeah. And the other thing, when I was trying to find out about his position in the Dominican order, the source I found said that they called them lay physicians, that he started as a tertiary, which, and then became a brother, which they said were both lay physicians. Did this say, was he, was a friar an ordained physician in the dome? Yeah, I wonder,
Equal fair
No.
opportunity.
There's monks and friars. Monks are from the cloistered community. Friars are mendicants, meaning they're out in the public and are begging. They're not, they don't have anything to earn
Okay.
place.
and did this say he did become a friar?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
well,
that's implied. They're becoming a member of.
okay,
The Dominican order is that you are
okay,
But I think
where the
you did
Yeah.
a terrific job.
oh, thank you.
Yes,
Thank
speaking
you.
as a fellow member of the.
Okay,
I'm gonna tell on you.
thank you.
and even in the Benedictine order, all members are brothers. Some are ordained as priests, but all are brothers.
Okay, so the distinction,
In fact, Benedict really discourages ordination.
okay,
He said that they sort of too easily saw themselves as above rather than part.
now they
of.
were.
And so the emphasis is
No,
no matter, you may become a priest, but you still march in order of seniority and when we process. So you're never
You know,
elevated except if you're celebrating mass.
okay, yeah. Well, it's interesting, because as I looked for information, and I wanna, because like I say, I found it very inspiring. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, running an orphanage, food and clothing.
He had the backing of when he got to that point, he had the backing of the friar.
He must have had,
Or the monastery or a friary is what the house of the Mendicant orders is called. Not a monastery, it's a friary.
I guess.
Friar, okay. Yeah, okay, interesting, because I want to read more about, see if I can find out more about it. Yeah, well, interesting.
And yeah, and sources are critical and sometimes difficult to figure out what to believe in.
It's,
And that's why when I really want to understand anything, I hunt for a more reliable source. It's either so
more primary.
yeah. So the with it coming from the Dominican order, they're saying this is what we're officially saying. Now you may find an academic source that has investigated more and has some other aspects, but the other thing I wanted to, when you talk about Candlemas and it being recorded from the 380s, I think that to me a distinction saying it's there's extant that records it in the 380s. so that you can understand
It's so wonderful.
that
I
it's
love what Kathy
final
said. It's like,
recording of what
here
has
we
been.
are.
And it doesn't really started at 3:00.
Oh, okay.
So if it's, there's an excellent literature showing that this was,
Yeah,
that this was an event.
yeah. We see how they-
And that's the academic thing, you wanting to
Oh,
really go, because it implies that, well, this may be the way,
The woman who was, all she did was a maid. She.
the way it said it, it's sort of
Well,
saying,
she
well,
probably cooking her ass off and cleaning up, but
this
that's
occurred
okay.
in 3 years.
I mean,
instead of
I'm saying, the women's liberation is
first
another part,
extant recording
and
of
within
this
the black
was created.
Yeah, and that's,
Oh,
just
yeah,
like there
it
was.
said it was
resistance
recorded, you
in the white
this
community.
Pilgrim recorded how it was
It's a
celebrated in the 380s.
Yeah,
So
well,
that you
Yes,
could interpret either way. So, right, the word, the way it's worded has to be very clear, but yeah, so it was
It was first recorded in 3
first recorded in 380.
Yeah.
That's a good, yeah.
Yeah, that's the same as extant, with many more people understanding it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
cause I'm a wuss.
Codex
Minnesotans, people born in Minnesota, you see, you'll go out, just say goodbye, Chuck, but I
New
just
Testament
figured
in the
out.
British Museum from early
5 minutes
300.
before.
So
Okay. Oh, okay.
So it's one
The
of
opposite
the,
of
it's
Hallelujah.
not from information about, it's
No, it is. It's
New Testament from that time.
Okay.
So-
And look at you, see, you're wearing cotton.
You
I wouldn't be
You
cotton.
can
This
say-
is wool and.
Just talked about this, that,
Thank you
this,
for your comment.
this is what it was.
This, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, trying to get something that's
Indeed. And
really
yeah,
is accurate, or that you trust is accurate.
what she said.
In this day and age, it's hard, and it's so,
Well,
it's
you know,
so
it's
easy
like,
to.
you know, the
rely
original intent
on
of these, the.
The AI summaries.
Nietzsche and Marx saying, you know, well, religion is the,
That they, I know they put those up in the very top, but right,
we have the victims.
if you're familiar with the subject, usually you read it and realize, they.
You know, defined by
The
your.
mix
things up.
Yeah, they mix the bad with the
Yeah.
good. They're summarizing what's said about it, not what's accurate.
But great,
Yeah.
great. Well, thank you. Yeah, do you know, I just realized Craig had to, do you know how to turn that on?
Yeah, we can just end it
Okay.
in the